Have you ever thought that one small key can change your whole life? This story is about Marian and her family who found an old family treasure. But along with it, they discovered secrets that changed their relationship forever. Watch to the end to find out what they found and how it affected their lives. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. Marian woke up in her small house surrounded by an apple orchard. Her life after the death of her husband George was quiet and measured, but full of loneliness. She found solace in memories and small pleasures like baking, tending to her garden, and talking on the phone with her children, Kevin and Sarah. It was an ordinary day that was to be the beginning of something extraordinary. Marian was making her favorite apple pie when the phone rang. "Mom, how are you? Sarah and I are planning to come down this weekend," Kevin's voice said. "Everything is fine, dear. I'm already waiting for you. The apple pie will be ready as usual," she replied with a smile. After the call, Marian decided to clean George's office. She had rarely been in there since his death, but today she felt the need to clean up this corner where he loved to work. While sorting through old papers and books, Marian came across a heavy metal key wrapped in a cloth. "What is this?" she wondered, looking at the object carefully. The key looked old with the initials, JB, engraved on it. Next to the key was an envelope signed by George's hand. For Marian. "Ava, open when the time is right," she read aloud. Her heart fluttered. Marian opened the envelope and found the letter. "My dear Marian, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. There is a secret in our family that I have kept all my life. This key leads to a treasure, but also to a truth that can change everything. Be careful before you look for it. George." Marian froze, feeling her breath catch in her throat. What did you mean, George? What treasure?" she whispered. That evening, Marian called Sarah and Kevin to tell them about her discovery. "Mom, do you think it's something important?" Maybe just an old souvenir," Sarah suggested. "No, he was too serious in his letter. It's not just a key," Marian replied. "We'll come back this weekend and look into it," Kevin added. Marian was relieved to know that she would not be left alone with this. That night she couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about George. He was a mysterious man, but he always cared about his family. Why didn't you ever tell me about this? Were you afraid that the truth would destroy our family?" she thought as she looked at the key on the table. The next day, Marian tried to keep herself busy with household chores, but her thoughts kept returning to the key and the letter. What kind of secret could be so important, and should I reveal it? She asked herself. Every detail, every memory of George now seemed to her to be part of a big puzzle. In the evening, Marian sat by the window, holding the key in her hands. That she knew that this object was connected to something more than just the memory of her husband. "I have to find out the truth, even if it changes everything," she said aloud. The morning after finding the key, Marian had mixed feelings. George's letter was on her mind. His words about a family secret sounded mysterious and disturbing. "What were you hiding, George? And why should I find out now?" she whispered, looking at the key in her hands. Marian decided to reread the letter, hoping to find clues. "Marian, if you are reading this, it means that I can no longer explain everything myself. There's a secret in our family that I've been keeping all my life. This key opens not only a door, but also access to a truth that can change the way you feel about me, about our life, and even about our past. If you decide to search, be careful. Some truths can be hard to accept." Marian trembled, feeling her heart clench with anxiety. "What could this mean? And what will I find if I use this key?" she thought. In the evening, Kevin and Sarah arrived at Marian's house. She met them with a letter in her hand. "Mom, you look worried. What's wrong?" Sarah asked as she sat down at the kitchen table. "It's George's letter. There are so many mysteries in it. He's talking about some truth that could change everything," Marian answered. Kevin took the letter and read it aloud. "Maybe it has to do with something important from his past." "But what? Why did he never tell you about it?" Kevin wondered. Maybe he was afraid that the truth would destroy our family," Sarah suggested. Marian and the children decided to look around George's office, hoping to find more clues. If this key unlocks something, then maybe there's something else in the study that will help us figure out where to look, Kevin said. Among the old papers and books, they came across a photograph of George standing next to a strange man outside an old house. Who is this? I've never seen this man before, said Marian, looking at the photo. On the back of the photo was written, 1912, house by the river. JB, the initials, JB, matched those engraved on the key. This house could be the place he talked about in the letter, Kevin suggested. But why didn't he say anything about it when he was alive? Maybe he was afraid we wouldn't understand his motives, Sarah wondered. Marian listened attentively to the children, but her mind was elsewhere. What exactly might we find in this house? And should we even be looking? She wondered. Sarah expressed her concerns. Mom, what if this secret will only bring us trouble? Maybe it's better to leave it alone, she said. But we can't ignore it. If George left us a key and a letter, it must be important, Kevin argued. Marian hesitated. She understood both points of view, but at the same time she felt she had to find out the truth. We have to try to find this house. Even if the truth is painful, we have to know it, Marian said, holding the key in her hands. The children nodded, realizing that to give up the search would be to betray the memory of their father. Late in the evening, Marian sat alone, looking at a photograph of the house. What have you left me, George? And why do I feel like this is just the beginning of something bigger? She thought. Marian, Kevin, and Sarah decided they couldn't let the mystery go unsolved. The key, the photo, and George's letter were the only clues, but their shared interest and anxiety became the driving force. And we have to find this house. This is our chance to find the truth, Kevin said, holding the photo in his hands. The first step was to contact the local archives. Marian and the children went there, hoping to find information about the house in the photo. We are looking for a house by the river that might have existed around 1912. Are there any records of owners with the initials JB? Kevin asked the librarian. The librarian listened carefully and agreed to help. We have old real estate registers. Let's see if we can find anything, she said, spreading out the yellow documents. After several hours of searching, they came across a record of a piece of land near the river that belonged to a man named John Barlow. This is it, JB, a John Barlow, Sarah exclaimed, showing her mother the deed. Document says the house was destroyed, but the land still belongs to the Barlow family, the librarian added. During the conversation with the librarian, they learned that the Barlow family had a controversial reputation, and it was said that John Barlow was involved in shady dealings. Some thought he was a smuggler, others a businessman. But whatever he did, he always kept his affairs secret, the woman explained. These words triggered a new wave of questions for Marian. If George knew about this, why did he keep it a secret? And what really connects our family to Barlow? She thought. The next step was to ask the town's old-timers, who they found 80-year-old Henry, who lived not far from where the Barlow house once stood. John Barlow. Yes, I heard about him from my grandfather. They say he was a cunning but dangerous man. His house was a place where no one wanted to go uninvited, Henry said. What happened to the house? Asked Marian. It burned down. But why are you interested in Barlow? Henry, he's long gone, Henry asked, looking at Marian intently. Marian hesitated to tell him about the key in the letter, but decided not to mention it. Henry showed them an old map that marked the spot where the Barlow house had stood. It's just ruins now. But if you're looking for something specific, you might find it there, he said, handing over the map. Kevin studied it carefully, and Sarah took a photo with her phone. On the way home, Sarah shared her doubts. Mom, what if this story will only bring us trouble? We don't know anything about these people or their business, she said. Sarah, we can't ignore this. And it's part of our family history, and we have to find out the truth, Marian replied. What if the truth destroys our family? Sarah asked, looking at her mother. Marian stopped and looked at the children. Maybe the truth will be painful, but we need to know what's behind that key in that letter. It's not just about George's past. It's about us, she said firmly. Kevin nodded, supporting his mother's decision. Late that night, Marian picked up the key again and looked at the map. Tomorrow we will go there. Whatever it is, I'm ready to find out the truth, she told herself. The morning was cool but sunny. Kothama, Marian, Kevin, and Sarah gathered around the car, ready to drive to the site where John Barlow's house once stood. Henry's map was their only guide. Are you sure we're ready for what we might find? Sarah asked, looking at her mother's grim face. We have to find out the truth, Marian replied firmly, clutching the key in her pocket. Their path took them through an old dirt road surrounded by dense forest. The closer they got the place, the more tension was felt. It looks like we're going back in time, Kevin said, stopping the car at an abandoned forest edge. It was so quiet here, as if time itself had stopped, Marian thought as she got out of the car. The ruins of the Barlow house looked like a chaotic collection of stones and crumbling wooden beams. Amidst the overgrown grass was an old stone cellar with an iron door. This must be what George was looking for, Kevin suggested, pointing to the door. The key in Marian's hand trembled as if answering her alarm. Marian walked to the door and put the key in the lock. It turned with a soft click. Ready?" she asked before pushing the door open. Behind them was a narrow descent downward, illuminated by the faint light that came through the cracks. Let's go down together," Kevin said, taking the flashlight. Inside the cellar they found old wooden boxes filled with yellowed papers. One of them was stamped with the initials JB. These are financial records," Sarah said, looking through the documents. They showed huge amounts of money made from smuggling and illegal trade. John Barlow was not just a businessman. He was a smuggler, Kevin said, reading one of the documents. Among the papers, Marian found a letter addressed to George. "George, you know that our family has always lived on secrets, but these are not just our secrets. If you decide to keep them, you will keep your wealth, but you will lose the trust of those you love." Marian read these words several times, not believing her eyes. Did George know all this? And he was silent, she asked aloud. If Sarah looked confused. If George kept it a secret, he had a reason. Maybe he wanted to protect us, she speculated. Kevin, however, looked furious. He let this lie hang over our family for the rest of our lives. How could he? He said, flinging the papers to the floor. Marian was silent. She felt both pain and shame, but she also realized that the truth had a price. Among the documents, Sarah found an old map with a location on the outskirts of the city. It looks like a storage facility. Another clue, she asked. Marian took the map and looked at it thoughtfully. If this leads us to a new truth, I don't know if I want to know it, she said. As she left the cellar, Marian felt the weight of the truth weighing on her heart. George, you wanted us to find this, but are we ready for what comes next? She thought, clutching the map in her hands. After the discovery in the cellar, Marian, Kevin, and Sarah returned home, their minds filled with doubts and questions. The map found among the documents led to another place where the ultimate truth was likely to be hidden. If we've come this far, we should finish it, Kevin said, looking at the map. But what if this truth divides us? Sarah asked, holding George's letter. The next morning, they set out following the directions on the map. The path led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It looks even creepier than here in the cellar, Sarah said, looking around the old building. Kevin picked up the lock hanging on the door. It was old, but still secure. "Mom, your key," he said, handing it to Marian. The key fit again, and the door opened with a soft creak. Inside they found a metal safe. On its surface were the same initials, JB. "This has to be it," Marian whispered, putting her hand on the safe. Kevin opened it, and inside they saw stacks of old banknotes, gold coins, and several documents. "This is a real treasure," he said, pulling out a coin and examining it closely. Sarah stood aside, looking at the treasure with an expression of alarm. "This wealth looks like it has brought more sorrow than joy," she said. "This is what we need to change our lives. Think of all the things we can do," Kevin argued. "But it's money that's been stolen, maybe even stolen by crime. We can't just take it," Sarah replied. Kevin and Sarah started to argue. "We have a right to it. It's part of our family legacy," Kevin said, raising his voice. "A heritage. It's a legacy of crime. If we take this money, we'll be just like the Barlows," Sarah insisted. Marian watched the children argue with a pained heart. "Enough," she said, stopping them. "We'll decide this together, but without shouting." Among the papers in the safe, they found a contract signed by John Barlow. It was a deed of transfer of land in case he could not pay his debts. This land we live on now. It was part of the Barlow deal," Marian said as she read the document. "That means our house is part of this story too," Sarah added. "The family is once again faced with a choice. We can sell these coins and money to solve all our problems, or we can hand it all over to the authorities and forget about this treasure," said Kevin. "But what if that leads to even more problems?" asked Sarah. Marian was silent, looking at the safe. "George wanted us to find it, but he also warned us that the truth could tear us apart," she finally said. Marian decided that they shouldn't rush. "We'll take these documents home and think about it. Our family is more important than any money," she said, closing the safe. The children agreed, but the tension between them remained palpable. That night, Marian sat in her room, holding the coin from the safe. Was this treasure a blessing or a curse for our family, and can we remain united if the truth has already begun to divide us? She thought. The morning after the treasure was found, the atmosphere in Marian's home was tense. The treasure they had discovered seemed to have begun to create cracks in the family's relationships. But Marian knew that the key to everything was in the documents they found with the coins and banknotes. If we want to understand what to do next, we have to find out the whole truth," she said, spreading the papers out on the kitchen table. Among the documents was an old agreement signed by John Barlow. It dealt with the transfer of large plots of land and houses as collateral. This agreement shows that John Barlow was a debtor to a large organization. "Perhaps it was a criminal organization," Kevin said, reading the text carefully. "But what does this have to do with us?" asked Sarah. "Look here," Kevin replied, pointing to the signature. "George Barlow, your great-grandfather, was the guarantor of this agreement. That means our family has always been involved in this business." Marian found another written by George, this time addressed directly to her. "Marian, I could not tell you this when I was alive. A truth could have destroyed our family. But now you have the right to know everything we have has come from this deal. And every success we have is the result of decisions that were made long before us. He knew we could recognize this, but he hoped we'd be smarter than those who came before us," Marian said, brushing away a tear. Kevin looked outraged. "We shouldn't give up this treasure. It is what is left of our ancestors." They fought for us to have it," he said. Sarah disagreed. "We cannot use this money. It is contaminated with greed and deception. If we do, we will betray our morals." Marian felt her heart breaking as she listened to them. Then they found a list of names among the papers. "These are the names of people who worked with Barlow," Sarah said. One name stood out, Thomas Reed, George's father. This means that even George grew up with this truth, but he chose not to pass it on to us until it was too late, Kevin said. Marian gathered the children around the table. "Hey, listen, I know that each of you has your own truth, but we can't let this treasure divide us. We have to find a way to use it for good or put it behind us," she said. "But how can we just forget about it?" Kevin asked. And how can we use it when we know it's wrong?" Sarah added. After a long discussion, they decided to donate all the documents to the local history museum. "This is not our wealth, and it's a part of history that should be preserved, but not for our enrichment," said Marian. Kevin reluctantly agreed, although he looked disappointed. That evening, Marian wrote a letter to the museum explaining the history they had uncovered. "We may lose our material wealth, but we will keep our family," she told her children. That night, Marian couldn't sleep, her mind racing with the truth they had uncovered. "George, you wanted us to know this, but can we put this behind us?" she thought. The decision to donate the treasure and documents to the museum was made, but the consequences of this step began to manifest themselves almost immediately. Tensions between Kevin and Sarah remained high, and Marian felt she was losing control of her family. Did we do the right thing? She asked herself as she sat in the kitchen looking at George's picture. Kevin was unhappy with the decision. We could have used that money to make our lives better. Now we're just giving it all away, he said during dinner. All you think about is money. And what if this money brings us more trouble than joy? Sarah replied, looking at her brother angrily. It's not just money. Sarah, it's our heritage, Kevin exclaimed. And our heritage is love and honesty, not a treasure that was stolen from us, Sarah insisted. Marian intervened, trying to calm the children down. Enough. This was a joint decision. We have to move on. And news of the treasure quickly spread through the city after museum confirmed receipt of the documents and artifacts. Marian, you really did a noble thing, said neighbor Marta. But not everyone was so supportive. You could have used the money for charity or kept it for yourself. Why did you just give it all away? Asked an acquaintance from the neighborhood. These words fueled Kevin's doubts even more. That evening, alone, Marian reflected on her decision. Maybe I was too quick, but could I risk this treasure dividing us even more? She thought as she flipped through an old photo album of family photos. Kevin began to distance himself from his family. He spent more time at work and was gloomy and distant at home. I feel like he holds a grudge against me, Marian told Sarah during their conversation. He needs time, Mom. He's always wanted to be more in control, and here we've all decided to do something different, Sarah replied. Marian decided to try to talk to Kevin. Son, I know you're feeling frustrated, but we did it to save our family, she said. Mom, I just can't understand why we had to give up something that could have changed our lives, Kevin replied. Because it could have destroyed us, and I couldn't let that happen, Marian said firmly. That evening, Sarah came across another document they hadn't noticed before. It was an old letter addressed to George. George, if you are reading this, know that wealth is only an illusion. The most valuable thing we have is the people we love. Take care of them, and you will never lose your true treasure. Sarah showed the letter to her mother, and they read it aloud together. It's the answer to everything we're worried about, Marian said, feeling relieved. Marian gathered the children around the table and read the letter to them. This is what George wanted. He wanted us to stay together, no matter what we find or lose, she said. Kevin thought about it, and Sarah, holding her mom's hand, added, maybe this treasure wasn't our true wealth. We have each other, and that's more important. That night, as she reflected on the events of the past few days, Marian felt a sense of peace. We have been through a lot, but is this really the end of the story? Or is there something else left undiscovered? She thought. After all the events, Marian and her children began to rebuild their lives. It seemed that the decision to give the treasure and documents to the museum helped them to lift the burden from their shoulders, but left them with many lessons and questions. We can't change the past, but we can change our future, said Marian at a family dinner, which for the first time in a long time was without argument. Marian has decided to devote herself to social activism. Her story about the treasure she found and her bold decision to give it to the museum has become an example for many. You are a true example of honesty and strength, said a local journalist who interviewed her for the newspaper. Marian began speaking at community events, telling her story and urging people to value family over material things. Kevin, who was initially unhappy with the decision to give away the treasure, gradually changed his attitude. He decided to use his experience in finance to help other people manage their money. I realize that money is just a tool, but if it is used incorrectly, it can destroy everything that is really important, he said during a conversation with Marian. His new job was fulfilling, and he started spending more time with his family. Sarah, who had always been against using the treasure, decided to go even further. She started doing charity work, creating a foundation to help children from low-income families. This foundation is our way of giving back what life has given us. We didn't take a treasure, but we can create something more valuable, she said at the foundation's opening. Marian, Kevin, and Sarah decided to organize a series of educational lectures for the local community. The topics ranged from financial literacy to preserving family values. This is our opportunity to do something important with the lessons we've learned, said Marian at the first meeting. The community warmly welcomed their initiative, and their neighbors became more supportive of their family. A few months later, the museum sent a letter thanking the family for their contribution to the preservation of history. Athena, thanks to you, we were able to create a new exhibit that tells the story of John Barlow's life and your family history, the letter read. Marian and the children attended the opening of the exhibition. They felt proud looking at the documents and artifacts that were now available to everyone. At the opening of the exhibition, the museum director handed Marian another document they had found among the papers. It was a personal letter from George, written a few days before his death. To Marian, if you are reading this, it means you have found a way to cope with what I have left behind. I always knew you were strong. I thank you for your love and faith. Take care of our family, because it is the most precious thing we have. I love you forever, George. Tears came to Marian's eyes as she read these words. That night, back home, the family sat together at the kitchen table. We've been through a lot, but I think we're ready to move forward now, Marian said, smiling at her children. And maybe do something more than just put it behind us, added Sarah. Let's plan together, Kevin agreed. Sitting on the porch, Marian looked up at the stars and thought, George, you left us a difficult legacy, but we made it through. But is it all over? Or is there something else I don't know? A year has passed since Marian and her family decided to donate the treasure to the museum. Their lives have gradually stabilized, and the family has found new meanings and directions for development. But the feeling that the story was not yet complete did not leave Marian. We've closed one chapter, but have we found all the answers? She thought as she looked at an old photo of John Barlow's house. One day, Marian received an unexpected letter from the museum. Mom, what is it? Sarah asked, seeing her mother reading the letter carefully. They found another document among the artifacts. It's a note that might be about our family, Marian answered. The letter said that John Barlow had left a message that was never found during the excavation. Marian and her children decided to visit the museum to view this new document. When they arrived, the museum director greeted them with enthusiasm. This is an extremely rare record. In it, Barlow writes about his fears and hopes, he said, handing them the old paper. Anyone who finds this message should know that wealth is only an illusion. It can divide families and destroy lives. But the real treasure is unity and trust. Take care of what you have and don't make the same mistakes I did. Barlow's words made Marian think even deeper. On the way home, the family discussed the meaning of these words. He realized it too late, and maybe he was trying to warn us through time, Sarah said. But why did he decide to send this message? And was there something else we missed? Asked Kevin. Marian just listened in silence, deep in thought. That evening, Marian decided to look through George's old diary, which was left in the study. As she flipped through the pages, she came across an entry she hadn't noticed before. I was not able to fulfill all my promises, but I believe that Marian and the children will find the right path. If they find this recording, let them know that treasure is just a tool. Love and family are the real wealth. George's words brought tears to her eyes, but also brought her peace. The next day, Marian told Kevin and Sarah about the diary entry. George always believed in us, and now I know we did the right thing, she said. But is that really all there is to it? Is there something else we don't know? Kevin asked. Even if there is, it won't change the main thing, we're still together, and that's what matters, Sarah replied. Marian felt that, despite all their experiences, they had become closer. She decided to write a book about their family's history to pass on the lessons to future generations. We can tell this story so that others will realize that true wealth is something that cannot be bought, she told the children. Kevin and Sarah supported her idea, and together they began to gather materials for the book. One evening, while looking through some old photographs, Marian came across a picture of George taken outside the same Barlow house. "And George, you left us more than just a treasure. A cake, you taught us a lesson we will never forget," she thought as she held the photo in her hands. When the book was almost complete, Marian received another letter from the museum. Or it was the museum again. What could they have found this time?" Sarah asked. Marian opened the letter and read it. "We have found another artifact that may be related to your family. It may be the key to another part of the story. Thank you for watching. What would you do if you were Marian? Would you leave the treasure or take a chance to find out more? Subscribe to the channel and leave your thoughts in the comments.